All right, let's dive in. We are about to crack the code on a language that is happening all around you, every single second of every day, and yet most of us are completely blind to it. We're talking about body language, the silent conversation that honestly says way more than our words ever could. So let me start by asking you a question. When you're talking with someone, do you think you're getting the whole picture? Really? What if I told you that the words themselves, the things you're actually hearing, make up only about 7% of the entire message? Just 7%. That means there's this other massive chunk, 93%, that's being communicated in a totally different way. And this isn't just a wild guess. This comes from some really groundbreaking research by Dr. Albert Mehrabian. Just look at this breakdown. It's kind of staggering, right? Only 7% is the actual words. Then you've got 38% that's vocal, the tone, the pitch, how fast or slow someone is talking. And then the biggest piece of the pie, a whopping 55%, is nonverbal. We're talking posture, gestures, eye contact, the whole shebang. So yeah, 93% of communication isn't about what you say, but how you say it and how you look when you're saying it. So for this first part, let's really dig into that. Let's focus on that massive and often totally missed piece of the puzzle, the unspoken 93%. Here's a great way to think about it. Body language is like the punctuation in a conversation. You know how a text message or an email can sometimes feel a little flat? You get the words, sure, but you lose all the emotional flavor. That's because you're missing the nonverbal cues, the little smile, the eye roll, the empathetic nod. Those are the signals that give our words their real meaning and context. Without them, all the emphasis just gets lost. Okay, this brings us to a really core principle, and this one is a game changer. It is incredibly difficult for your body to tell a convincing lie. And here is the golden rule, the one you absolutely have to remember. When what someone says doesn't match up with what their body does, people will, almost without fail, believe what they see. Our gestures and subtle movements are often running on autopilot, directed by the part of our brain that knows the truth, even when our mouths are trying to cover it up. Think about it. Someone can say, oh yeah, I'm feeling totally confident about this presentation, but at the same time, their shoulders are slumped forward and their chest is caved in. Well, their body is practically screaming insecurity. That posture, that becomes the real story, the undeniable truth of how they feel. So what's happening in our brains when we see this? It's something called cognitive dissonance. It's that uncomfortable feeling you get when you're getting two conflicting messages at once. The words say one thing, but the body says the exact opposite. And our brain hates that confusion. To get rid of that discomfort, we instinctively just default to what we see because we trust it more. So, why is it so honest? Well, it's not magic, it's just biology. A lot of these signals are innate, they're hardwired right into us from birth. They have these deep evolutionary roots that go way back to our primate ancestors and their survival instincts. They're tied to that primal fight-or-flight response we all have. And here's the kicker, it's almost all subconscious. Our bodies are just constantly sending out thousands of signals without us even thinking about it. Okay, so we get why it's so important. But now for the fun part. How do we actually start to decode these signals when we see them out in the wild? Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, here is the single most important rule of all. You can never, ever interpret a single gesture by itself. One gesture can mean a dozen different things. The real key is to look for what the experts call clusters of signals, and you always have to, always, consider the context of the situation. Let's take a classic example, crossed arms. Sure, it can absolutely mean someone is feeling defensive or they're shutting you out. But it could also just mean they're chilly, or maybe it's just a comfortable way for them to stand. That's why you gotta look for the cluster. Are their lips pursed? Are they leaning away from you? Are their eyebrows furrowed? That's what tells you the whole story. All right, here's a much more subtle one, but it is so revealing. Watch people's feet. Our brains are basically wired for two things: move toward what we want and get away from what we don't. And believe it or not, our feet often give the game away. They unconsciously point in the direction our mind really wants to go. So if you're talking to someone and their body is facing you, but their feet are angled toward the door, well, their body might be telling you they're itching to leave. And another huge signal is how we use space around us. We all have this invisible personal bubble, and the size of that bubble can tell you a lot about a relationship. You've got the intimacy zone, that's reserved for people we're super close with. The personal zone is more for friends at parties, and the social zone is for strangers or people you just met. How someone moves in and out of these zones is a massive clue about how they see you. Okay, so let's take everything we've learned and apply it to something truly fascinating: spotting the telltale signs of when someone might not be telling the truth.
Here's the thing you have to understand about lying. For our brains, it's actually really hard work. It takes a ton of mental energy. And all that stress sets off our nervous system, the part we can't consciously control. This can trigger these little involuntary physical reactions, what some people call tells, that kind of leak out and can give away the lie. Now, it's really important to say these are just clues, okay? Not solid proof. But some common signals to watch for are things like suddenly touching the back of the neck. That's a response to anxiety. Or a tiny little shoulder shrug that releases tension. You might see that foot shuffling again, signaling that desire to escape. Even something like sitting weirdly still can be a sign, as the person is trying to lock down their body so it doesn't betray them.
So you've got the theory down, but how do you actually turn all this information into a real practical skill? Well, you have to train your powers of observation. You got to channel your inner Sherlock Holmes.
So, how do you practice? It's actually pretty simple and kind of fun. First, just become a people watcher. Seriously, go to a cafe or a park and just observe. Try to guess the stories of the people you see, just based on their nonverbal cues. Second, look at photos of people you know. What do their postures tell you? What about the space between them? And third, this one's my favorite. Watch a really dramatic scene from a TV show, but with the sound turned completely off. See if you can follow the entire emotional roller coaster just by watching the actors' bodies. When you really get down to it, learning this skill is like being given a brand new sense. It unlocks this whole other layer of communication that was there the whole time, hidden in plain sight, but you just weren't tuned into it. It's not about becoming a mind reader, it's about becoming a much more empathetic and sharp observer of what it means to be human.
So I'll leave you with this thoughts. You now have the basic rulebook for this hidden language. The next time you're in a meeting or on a date or even just chatting with a friend, start paying attention. Pay attention to that unspoken 93%. Now that you know the rules of the game, what do you think you're going to start to see?